The Twisted Metal TV series is here, and another infamous game has had its rebirth in the form of a TV show. Not on Netflix, not on Prime, not on Disney, but on Peacock. With the show receiving pretty good initial responses prior to its release and it having a star-studded cast along with an ambiguous ending, I thought I'd recap, break down, and explain all that there was to take away from the show. So let's get into it. Here is the Twisted Metal TV series ending explained and review. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Oh, and if you enjoy the video then feel free to hit subscribe. Thanks. I'll break this video down by each of the main characters in the show as they all had a large involvement and a slightly different ending. John Doe. John Doe was the main character that we followed throughout the entirety of the show. He had no recollection of his memory other than when he woke up in a car after what was described as the Fall happening. An apocalyptic event which occurred 20 years ago and sent the world into chaos and disarray. This event led some civilizations to be born, but for others to be disregarded and abandoned. The lower citizens and the prisoners were the ones that were on the outside. John, however, was what could be described as a milkman, an individual who carried out deliveries between cities behind the borders. It gave him some perks in life, but it also put him in a lot of danger, because milkmen would often be targeted for their packages. We saw that John Doe was offered a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do one final pickup and drop-off. This was for the COO of New San Francisco, a person called Raven, and if he did it successfully, then in 10 days he'd be able to reside within New San Francisco for the rest of his days, fulfilling the undying legacy and dream of his of being the first milkman to ever die of old age and of natural causes, and not whilst on the road. Within the game, Raven is a driver who drives the vehicle called Shadow, so it doesn't seem as though that's going to be fulfilled in this series. This is what the main plot ultimately centered around with the character. We saw him encounter many different characters along the way, such as Quiet, who he started forming an intimate relationship with and got feelings for, Sweet Tooth, who he avoided and managed to get on his side for the most part, Watts and Amber in the trucks who were on his side, but one of the most important ones was Agent Stone, an individual who was the barrier to him being able to carry out the job in the final stage. Stone was a power-hungry and insecure individual that wouldn't let him pass as he felt as though he owned the roads. John had a deep connection with his car which he called Evelyn due to the fact that it was the very thing that saved him many years ago when he first woke up, something which we saw in a flashback. He fixed her up and then always kept her in good condition. The importance of the car was thrown into question when we heard Bloody Mary say to Quiet that he would never put her over the car, which was something that we did see taking place when they went and saw the Holy Men and the Preacher, but it ultimately ended up being destroyed, meaning that John Doe had to move on. With John having the package collected from Calypso from New Chicago and managing to make it back to the border of New San Francisco, we saw that he went into the city on his own, despite promising Quiet that she'd be able to go with him. But due to her not being allowed as she wasn't part of the initial deal, she forced him to go in by firing at him and making him need medical attention. It was here where we saw the main twist occur. John Doe wasn't built for a life of being behind walls and without action, a life where routine was at the core of it all. He was a milkman and wanted to live more freely, hence why we saw him state that he wanted to leave the city. But Raven wasn't prepared to allow him to do that. She showed him his old home and photos of his family, and promised that she'd teach him more about his old life, seeing as though he knew nothing about it. But he was prepared to throw it all away to go and find Quiet and to be with her, as he truly cared about her and had never felt like that about anybody before. But Raven was having none of it. She instead said that he couldn't leave as he'd be competing in a tournament where all of the best drivers around the country would be competing, and only one person would be able to survive, and he was her driver. His initial 10-day quest to get the ice cream from Calypso was a test, in order to see if he was good enough to do it and to see if he'd be able to survive, and it confirmed that he was. With the likes of the Preacher, Watts, and many others appearing on the board, such as Axel, a character from the game that we didn't see in the show, Season 2 has well and truly been set up. Quiet. Quiet's story was one of overcoming adversity and finding a sense of belonging in a world that wasn't accepting of her. We first saw her when her brother ended everything for himself when they were put in a predicament by Agent Stone, hence where her driving force came from throughout the entirety of the show. She wanted to seek revenge on the fact that Agent Stone, an insecure individual, utilized his power for the wrong reasons and was ruining the outside world. We saw what her life was like before she went on the run with her brother, and it looked awful. There was a form of modern-day slavery that was present post the fall, and people were being sold false promises and being exploited. Her brother's death was something that she wasn't able to get over for a very long time, and it was only through the help of John Doe and meeting him that she was able to focus on something different and find a sense of purpose in her life. Her climax came when she faced off against Agent Stone, and we saw a finale like what actual gameplay of the Twisted Metal games would be like. All vehicles and drivers facing off against one another, with only one of them coming out alive. This was where we saw that after it was just John Doe, Quiet, and Agent Stone left on the track, they drove head-on towards Stone and switched on a ramp on Roadkill, Evelyn's replacement, which caused Stone to go up in the air and to crash his vehicle. However, he survived, and he ultimately dragged Quiet out of the car and thought that he was going to end it for her. But instead, John Doe landed his first ever shot and hit Stone in the face, which then left a predicament for him, exactly like what he left for Quiet and her brother when he died. Stone could either die slowly or quickly, and that decision was all in his hands, with us hearing him fire the weapon as Quiet and John drove off into the distance. It seems as though he took the quick method. With Quiet not being able to go inside of New San Francisco, we saw her become this Robin Hood type character, an individual that was robbing from milkmen, taking half and giving it to the poor and people that needed supplies outside of the city walls. She missed John deeply as she was having flashbacks of him, like he was of her. The final thing that we saw with Quiet, and in fact the entirety of the season, was her being stopped by Dollface, a character in the game that didn't make an appearance prior to the last shot of the season. With her saying that she's heard of Quiet, it does make me wonder what's going to happen next. Will she be recruited, or will they face off against each other? Sweet Tooth. Sweet Tooth was definitely my favourite character in the show. He provided great comic relief, and Will Arnett's voicing of this character was just nailed down to a T. The menacing nature paired with the mentally unstable kindness was enough to send shivers down your spine if you were to ever see him in person. His relationship that he built with Stu was one that I really enjoyed watching. They felt like they had common ground because they were big guys, despite the fact that Stu was nothing like Sweet Tooth. We heard all about Sweet Tooth's backstory and how he came to be an insane individual. He was called Marcus and was a child actor, but due to his co-star Billy the dog becoming the name of the show, he took out his anger on the dog on set and was sent to an insane asylum where he was eventually left on his own. It was only once the fall happened that he found himself free. This was also where his love for the arts came from, due to the fact that he did it when he was younger. We saw just how chaotic he was during the finale, where he was killing people that were on his side. He went on to say there are no sides, which showed that he was never going to be a trustworthy partner, hence why we saw Stu and Mike fire at him, which then resulted in him getting hit by a car, and his mask ultimately being left on the ground. I think we'll most definitely see him on screen in the next season. The meticulous placement of the mask says 1,000 words. Agent Stone. Agent Stone was actually one of the most fleshed out characters in the show. As a mall cop, back before the fall, he was shown no respect by anybody around him. And we saw that on the day of the fall, he turned into the individual that we saw in the present day. He killed a bunch of innocent people as they mocked him in front of his eyes. The most important part about this though was the fact that he killed a young girl and he showed no remorse. This is why he was the hard-faced, tough individual in the present day. He had a power complex and was insecure about the power that he actually had. This narrative drifts slightly from the game, but it was one that definitely added a more understandable backstory and tied into his motives. He was an evil individual who almost took pride in killing people, so with him being no more, I don't think we'll be seeing him again. The final thing that he saw was the teddy bear of the young girl that he killed all of those years ago, showing that in his final moment he became who he was before the fall, where he had emotions. Overall review. I actually really enjoyed this series. I thought it was just a bit of fun and something which was a bit different. The soundtrack behind the TV series was something that I was a huge fan of as well, and I thought complemented the scenes. I also thought the driving shots, whilst they looked fake, you could tell that they tried to mirror the game, so I respect that. Anthony Mackie as John Doe felt like a really good casting, and his chemistry with Beatriz was one massive takeaway from the series. The blood and gore was very comic, but at the same time it felt very real, allowing individuals like Sweet Tooth to feel menacing in a way that transcended reality. He didn't feel 100% real, and I thought that was the best way for him to be, because he's almost like what nightmares are made of. The story was good, although it felt like it was more about character building between John Doe and Quiet, which I didn't mind. I do wonder if there will be a season 2, especially with all of this stuff about Peacock not being that successful at the moment, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. So, there you have it, the Twisted Metal TV series ending explained and review. What did you think of this show? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.